Right now, while you're watching this, you are handing over somewhere between $128 and $241 every summer month for something a buried pipe handles better. That is $1,536 at the low end. That is $2,892 at the high end. Stretch that across 12 summers, and you have paid $18,432 to $34,704 just to make August tolerable. Now compare it with this: a trench, a pipe, a fan that pulls less power than an old porch bulb. Total build cost: $286 to $472. 5 minutes after startup, the air coming through it measured 9 degrees cooler than the air outside. That is the number. 9 degrees. Not because the machine worked harder, because there was no machine doing the hard part. The ground did it. The soil already under your feet. The same earth your house is sitting on right now. And the people collecting that money know exactly what I'm about to show you. They have known since 1902. That is exactly why you never see this on a contractor's estimate. You see tonnage. You see financing. You see warranties. You see the monthly bill they trained you to accept. I went looking for the oldest version I could still touch. I found it in Holmes County, Ohio, then again in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Not in a lab, not in a showroom. In working buildings that stayed calmer than the air outside because somebody refused to forget what the ground already knows. Here is the promise. If you understand one simple path for air and one stable temperature under your yard, you can take a room, a shop, or a farmhouse and pull it toward the Earth's own baseline. In my test, the shift was 9 degrees in 5 minutes. And yes, this works even if your house was built 50 years ago, you live in a city, you've never done this before, and you don't have land. Stay with me. Because what I found in Holmes County uses the same physics the Persians used to cool desert rooms more than 2,500 years ago. The science is brutally simple. 6 to 8 feet below grade, soil stops swinging with the day and starts tracking the annual average instead. That means the earth under you stays far steadier than the air around you. On a blazing afternoon, outside air can hit 92 or 95 degrees Fahrenheit, while the soil a few feet down sits near the low to mid-50s in parts of Pennsylvania and Ohio. The United States Department of Energy explains the same principle in its geothermal guidance. The earth acts as a heat source in winter and a heat sink in summer. That is the whole trick. You are not making cold. You are moving heat somewhere calmer. Think about a car radiator in reverse. Your engine dumps heat into flowing fluid, then into metal, then into air. An earth tube does the same exchange backward. Hot summer air moves through buried pipe. The pipe touches cooler soil. The soil steals heat from the air before that air reaches you. When you add a ground source heat pump, the Department of Energy notes a coefficient of performance around 3 to 6 units of heating or cooling benefit for every 1 unit of electricity. Electric resistance heat gives you roughly 0.98. Our buried tube version strips the concept down further. The soil does the exchange. The fan only moves air. One calm 40 to 70 watt draw can deliver a measurable drop that a compressor usually charges hundreds per month to imitate. That gap represents a massive market in equipment, service, refrigerant, and replacement every year. And that is why you have never heard of this. There is another piece of the science most people miss. The first drop feels dramatic because the system attacks peak heat where you feel it first. Skin does not read average conditions the way a spreadsheet does. Skin reads moving air, surface temperature, and radiant load. Drop the incoming air, cool one wall, and reduce late-day heat soak, and the room feels different before the whole building reaches a new equilibrium. That is why the 5-minute result matters. You are not waiting for a giant slab of mechanical equipment to brute force the entire house. You are shifting the room's incoming heat balance. The wall absorbs less. The floor stores less. Your body stops fighting both air temperature and hot surfaces at once. Humidity matters too. Warm air carries more moisture than cooler air. When that air moves through a buried run, some of that water condenses out if the pipe wall falls below the dew point. That is free dehumidification, but only if you respect drainage. Again, the earth does two jobs at once. It cools, it dries. The University of Nebraska research on underground cooling systems and multiple extension designs all circle the same conclusion. Burial depth, airflow speed, and drainage decide whether you built a climate tool or a mildew trap. That is why careful people get such good numbers while careless people complain online that the idea failed. Not because it failed, because the install was lazy. The first time I felt it working, I was outside Berlin in Holmes County on a 91-degree afternoon. The cicadas were loud. The gravel was bright. Then I stepped into a shaded workroom where air was moving through a buried run and out a simple vent box. The temperature on my handheld meter fell fast. The sound did not change because there was almost no sound at all. No compressor kicked on. No condenser rattled. I remember hearing a chair scrape, a fly hit the screen and boots crossing dry plank flooring. That was it. An Amish man named Eli leaned on the doorframe and watched me stare at the numbers. He smiled once and said, "The ground stays honest." 4 words. That was his whole lesson. He told me his father used the same idea. His grandfather did too. 4 generations, he said, and longer if you count what came from people before them. That line runs back through the Palatinate and Canton Burn, where Swiss and German builders relied on cellars, spring houses, shaded masonry, and earth-tempered air long before central air existed. A 1943 Penn State Agricultural Extension circular on farmstead planning still treated orientation, cellar cooling, and shaded intake air as practical design, not folklore. That knowledge never disappeared. It was written out of the manual. It was waiting. I saw the disciplined version in Lancaster County near Strasburg. It was 88 degrees outside, and the lane smelled like hay dust and warm pine. Inside a detached summer kitchen, the incoming air felt like a shaded creek bank. The thermometer on the sill showed a lower reading than the porch by enough to feel immediately, yet there was still no modern system whining overhead. A man named Jacob walked me to the intake side and pointed with his boot. He cared about shade before pipe. He cared about drainage before fan size. He cared about the line staying clean and straight. He said too many English homeowners start with gadgets because gadgets feel modern. Then they call the old method primitive when the lazy version disappoints them. He was right. The buried tube is not magic. It is geometry, patience, and respect for water. Keep the run straight. Keep the trench deep enough. Keep the outlet sealed. Keep the intake shaded and screened. Then the result stops looking exotic and starts looking inevitable. That is exactly how old knowledge survives. It never survives as a slogan. It survives as a habit. Eli in Holmes County and Jacob near Strasburg were not preserving folklore for tourists. They were protecting a sequence: site first, shade second, depth third, air path fourth. Then let the seasons prove the design. Go back farther and you see the same answer repeating. In ancient Persia, builders in Yazd used badgirs, tall wind catchers, with underground qanat water channels. The BBC's historical reporting on the system notes indoor reductions of roughly 15 degrees Celsius. Desert air entered hot. It left tamed. The Romans worked with the same logic in buried passages, thick masonry, and shaded cistern courts. In summer villas, Coulth lived in stone, depth, and controlled airflow. Native builders in the American Southwest did it too. Adobe walls up to 2 feet thick and partly earth-sheltered rooms slowed daytime heat so hard that interiors stayed bearable when the sun outside turned brutal. Different languages, same physics. Every civilization that mastered extreme heat arrived at the same answer independently. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from the Palatinate to Pennsylvania and Ohio more than 200 years ago, and kept building it because it worked and because they never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. Here is where the anger starts. In 1902, Willis Carrier solved a real industrial problem at the Sackett-Wilhelms lithographing plant in Brooklyn. By 1906, he had the patent for an apparatus for treating air. The machine had value. Nobody disputes that. But once compressor cooling became a product instead of a trick, every passive alternative threatened a future market measured in equipment sales, service contracts, duct retrofits, and financed replacements. The suppression did not happen with one villain in one room. It happened through standards, schools, and sales language. In mid-century design manuals, summer comfort moved steadily away from orientation, shading, thermal mass, and earth coupling toward mechanical set points. By 1957, the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers was standardizing indoor design targets that assumed conditioned interiors as the norm. A generation of builders learned to size equipment first and ask what the site already offered second. Then, the public story did the rest. Carrier advertised comfort. Utilities advertised modern living. Magazine after magazine sold the same image: sealed windows, humming certainty, and a family buying freedom by the month. Nobody told you. Not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who sold you tonnage. The named allies were not subtle. Carrier profited by selling equipment. Electric utilities profited by growing summer demand and flattening seasonal revenue swings. Better Homes and Gardens, Popular Mechanics, and trade magazines filled page after page with paid comfort advertising from the same manufacturers shaping the market. Government underwriting favored standardized systems and repeatable suburban plans, which made equipment-led comfort easier to scale than site-specific passive design. An entire field of knowledge disappeared from architecture schools, building codes, and engineering curricula. Not because it failed, because it wasn't profitable. That omission has a paper trail. In 1928, the American Society of Heating and Ventilating Engineers was already publishing comfort guidance that translated human sensation into controllable interior targets. Useful work. Real work. But the market heard something simpler. Comfort can be purchased on demand. Once that idea hardens, climate wisdom tied to site, wall thickness, orientation, porch depth, cellar buffering, and earth coupling looks old-fashioned even when it costs less and lasts longer. Look at the modern continuation, and it becomes obvious. In 2021 and again through 2023, energy code battles centered on how much efficiency builders should be forced to include before the homeowner pays the utility forever. Home builder organizations called stronger rules unaffordable. Gas interests called them anti-competitive. Yet the monthly bills those weaker homes create are somehow treated as normal. That is the trick. Push the cost forward. Hide it in decades. When the International Code Council fought over the 2024 Energy Code pathway, the American Gas Association publicly celebrated removed provisions while industry groups kept warning about affordability. Open secrets showed the money around that ecosystem plainly enough. If better envelopes, shading, or passive strategies reduce bought energy, Entire revenue streams shrink. Nobody in that chain wants a house that needs less from them. So when somebody tells you this buried air idea sounds too simple, hear the subtext. Simple is dangerous when complexity is profitable. Simple is dangerous when the customer can build it. Simple is dangerous when the earth does the expensive part for free. The HVAC equipment market in America is worth tens of billions a year. Every passive alternative installed is tonnage that never gets sold, serviced, replaced, or financed. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people with land, stay with me. Because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to tear up your foundation, rip out your existing system, or buy equipment. You need a yard, a drill, and a weekend. Start with the simplest version. You pick the hottest side of your house and walk 60 to 80 feet away from the wall you want to help. From there, you trench one run at 6 to 8 feet deep. Keep the pipe length between 50 and 80 feet for a small room or 90 to 120 feet for a larger shop. Use 6-inch HDPE or 6-inch schedule 40 PVC. Bury it with a 1% slope back toward a condensate drain point. That slope matters, more than you think. The intake should stand 24 to 36 inches above grade with a hood and stainless mesh screen. The outlet enters a plenum box or wall register sealed with butyl tape and closed cell foam. If you want smoother airflow, add one long radius sweep instead of a sharp 90, then add movement. A quiet inline duct fan in the 40 to 70 watt range is enough for a test run. At the intake, place a washable MER V8 filter and a second bug screen. At the outlet, insulate the last 3 to 4 feet where the pipe approaches your wall, so you keep the temperature you paid the trench to win. If your soil stays damp, bed the pipe in 3/4 inch washed gravel and sleeve crossings with SDR 35 or heavier wall stock. Here is the warning. The slope is not optional. Flat pipe causes condensate pooling, biofilm, and mold. Do not substitute thin corrugated drain tubing. The ridges trap moisture and turn the whole run into a dirty lung. For most retrofits, materials land low. One 60-foot run of 6-inch pipe costs $90 to $160. The inline fan costs $38 to $72. Mesh, filter box, tape, foam, and hood add $44 to $81. If you rent a trencher for one Saturday morning, that is another $95 to $140. Even if you add gravel, you stay in the $286 to $472 range. On a 95-degree day, with outside air at full afternoon heat, a properly buried run like this can feed air that lands around 54 to 56 degrees at the pipe interior and arrives several degrees warmer at the vent. In my test, the room-side air was still 9 degrees cooler within 5 minutes, and the wall temperature started dropping soon after. Not instantly, reliably. Maintenance is light. You check the intake screen once a month in summer. You wash the filter once a season. You inspect the drain and plenum once a year. Buried HDPE lasts decades. The Department of Energy says ground loops in geothermal systems commonly exceed 50 years. Your fan will die long before the pipe does. If your yard is small, you still have options. One 40-foot trench along a fence line helps a bedroom. A pair of 4-inch lines under a narrow side yard can outperform one awkward, oversized run because airflow stays smoother. If you cannot dig 8 feet, then 6 feet still gives strong tempering in many climates. Depth buys stability. Length buys exchange. Straightness buys cleanliness. Use a clean-out tee where the line turns vertical at the house. Put a removable cap on it. That gives you inspection access and future sanitation if insects ever get past the screen. Add a slight sacrificial gravel sump at the low point. If you want extra insurance, use a small condensate trap with a rodent-proof outlet screen. Cheap parts, serious payoff. For the intake hood, do not use flimsy dryer vent hardware. Use a rigid hood with a drip edge and stainless screen. Mount it where mowing clippings cannot blast into it. If possible, place it on the north or east side of a hedge, shed, or fence. Cooler intake air means less work for the earth and drier output at the other end. And remember the larger lesson. A house is not a machine you buy once. It is a climate strategy you either respect or ignore. The Amish keep getting this right because they do not ask one purchased device to undo 5 preventable design mistakes. They reduce the load first. Then they temper the air. Then they live with the season instead of declaring war on it. That knowledge never disappeared. It was filed away. It was waiting. You can scale up later. 2 parallel 4-inch lines sometimes fit a tight yard better than one 6-inch line. A shaded intake helps. A north side inlet helps more. If you add low-E radiant foil in the attic and close west-facing blinds by 2 p.m., the tube suddenly performs like part of a system instead of a lonely trick. Your conventional system costs $7,400 to $14,600 to install. $128 to $241 per month to run, and lasts 12 to 16 years before it ends up in a landfill. This costs $286 to $472 total. It lasts 30 to 50 years. Your choice. Everything I've covered across this channel, root cellar food storage, lime wash moisture control, and off-grid hot water, I've put it all in one place. Step by step, season by season, room by room, in the order the families actually use it. The link is in the description. But stay here, because what Eli showed me in Holmes County is the part nobody is talking about yet. There is one more piece people miss. The Amish did not stop at one buried line and call it wisdom. They paired cool air with shade trees, porch depth, attic venting, cellar buffering, and ruthless control over late-day sun. The buried tube helps because the house stops fighting it. That is the part modern retrofits forget. I saw that in Lancaster County, too. East Hempfield heat felt heavy in the lane, but the house itself stayed measured. A woman named Miriam opened a summer kitchen door and told me they never ask one trick to do 5 jobs. The tree shades the wall protects the room, the cellar protects the food, the vent protects the sleep. That is not nostalgia. That is systems thinking. The Amish didn't read this in a textbook. They figured it out the way all real knowledge gets discovered, by paying attention to what the earth was already doing. Then they kept the pieces that paid them back. And that is what I want you to hold on to tonight. You were trained to think comfort arrives in a box, financed over time, serviced twice a year, and discarded on schedule. That is the modern religion. But the earth under your own yard is sitting there at a steadier temperature than the air you are paying to fight. It never sends an invoice. It never needs a compressor. It never forgets the laws of heat. If you're the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe, not for me, for what comes next. Because this is not a channel. This is a quiet movement of people who have decided they're done being sold what they already own. I want to hear from you. Drop your state, your worst summer power bill, or the oldest cooling trick your family still remembers in the comments. I read every single one. And your answers decide what we cover next. Next week, I'm going to show you what a 1946 Penn State document reveals about keeping stored food cold with nothing but airflow, lime, and shade. The technique uses nothing but brick, water, and dark space. And the bulletin that proves agricultural planners knew about it decades before selling everyone more equipment. You're not going to want to miss that one.